Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's welcome to this week's Secrets of Flow. Every Tuesday at 12 o'clock noon in the Eastern time zone of the United States and Canada, and earlier hours in other time zones on this continent, and early evening hour in Europe, and so on and so forth, depending on where you are. Every week at this hour, I try to create some time and space to discuss the flow of creative intellectual work of modern workers, managers, and enterprises, how to make it better for better outcomes for business, customers, with less burnout for people doing the work. So this is your weekly time and place for this kind of insights and, of course, practical advice. And today we have a huge topic ahead of us, huge and exciting. It's about seeing work in progress, like that which is the central thing of what we're talking about every week here. The work that's sometimes I just describe it as just thoughts in people's heads. No, of course, well, there's some other artifacts such as software code, all sorts of designs, texts, all sorts of information stored in various computers and cloud storage. However, this work is largely invisible. Very difficult to see how it's progressing. If we have some crazy theory about how it's progressing, and we're wrong, of course, it's not that easy to pick up a signal from the real world to actually see that we're wrong. So it's difficult to manage and improve. But we're still trying our best at this. And today we'll look into various places where work in progress hides and how we can uncover it and see quantities of it that we didn't perhaps suspect that they exist in those places. We'll find it today. And this work in progress has, of course, very important impact on our results, let's say delivery of our projects, our products, services, and of course customer satisfaction and business results. That there are consequences of how we deliver our work. And of course, we'll explore this connection with some practical results. So there are five major areas where I'm gonna go look for work in progress. So please stay tuned. We'll start perhaps with one area that's on one hand relatively simple and at the same time feels like really difficult to handle at the same time. And then, of course, I'll try to move in somewhat logical order to four other areas. And, of course, in each area, we'll see some interesting consequences of how work in progress, its presence and quantity, affects all sorts of outcomes, when those outcomes can be unsatisfactory, and if so, what are the keys to avoiding that and actually improving your outcomes, whether they are about customer happiness, business, or any other measure. So let's consider our first kind of situation, which is like really simple in concept and at the same time kind of difficult to deal with. So here we have a situation that the work just keeps coming in, and there's a huge amount of it, and it's potentially endless. It just never stops. I'm talking about situations like customer support. Sometimes it happens in let's say sales, when there is a team that processes quote requests from prospective customers. It happens sometimes in services like, let's say, a loan application group at the bank. So customer simply shows up and submits the request. And if you have a lot of customers, you can potentially have a lot of requests, and they may all land on your desk almost at the same time, and it could be quite large number of them. So let's say a manager here did some prioritization for their team, and the team is working on the relatively few requests at this time. And sometimes this is a reality. If you handle a customer support call, well, let's say you are on the phone or on Zoom, you are physically present in just one of these conversations. So you're really just working on one particular customer service request. So let's say there are relatively few items that we're working on here. Now, we could, of course, specify some kind of numeric work in progress limit here. Let's say it should be a number, let's say 4 or higher, considering that we have already 4 items in progress here. Perhaps the manager of this service also created some kind of a short list or a queue or a backlog of requests to work on next, so that the team can perhaps pull the next request out of the queue when they're done with the one they're currently working on. And this way they can get through the day without constant supervision, while the manager, let's say, can attend to some other matters. So, folks, something important about this picture is that it's something I want you to do more consistently and apply in your workplace. And if you already know this, teach it to other people. The work in progress isn't these 4 items that the workers are handling right now. It isn't, let's say, an additional 8 items that are waiting for them, right? I want you to change the thinking from, okay, work in progress is what I'm working on, and think of it more expansively as inventory of customer commitments. So everything we have promised to our customers and not yet delivered. All right, and that includes, of course, the items we're currently actively working on, some items that we will be working on shortly, and of course it includes a whole bunch of other things over here on the left. And if we look at this picture from our customer's perspective, then basically the work in progress starts here at this red line and it continues all the way to here. This is really our inventory of customer commitments. This is our work in progress. And if this number is very large, then that's a leading indicator that our customers are not going to be very happy, because many of them face significant waiting times from the time they submit their request, from the time they have some kind of expectation of receiving service, whatever it is, to when the result is actually delivered to them. And if we simply zoom in on some part of this picture and focus on relatively few items, and this is something perhaps can help team members in this sort of situations. They do need to focus on a few items. If we look at this from the point of view of, let's say, a manager accountable for, let's say, performance of this service, then we must absolutely take the big picture into account, and it includes a huge number of work items on the left. And potentially, there's more of these items coming. All right, let's discuss some keys to success in this kind of situation, and it has something to do with bringing this whip under control. And again, folks, I said at the start that we could perhaps, specify some sort of WIP limit here. Let's say it's number 4. It doesn't actually limit work in progress at all, because the increment to this total inventory of outstanding customer requests happens well without our control. Customers just show up and place their request, right? And they're free to do this at any minute, at any quantity. So first of all, I'm just gonna unhide a chart here, and I want to show you. What we can do is chart on a daily basis how many items promised to customers not yet delivered. And here the promise is automatic. The nature of all such services, such as, let's say, customer support, is that we're automatically committed to delivering some kind of result on customer's request. Let's just simply take the number of such outstanding requests, the size of our inventory on a daily basis, and we can, over time, compile a chart like this. And this chart clearly shows to a manager, for example, in this case, that the trend is towards increasing WIP. And that just means customers are facing increasingly longer wait times from submission of their request to the result. And something has to be done, because this isn't a sustainable situation. What can realistically be done? There is a number of strategies, and one of them is about quality. What often happens in such real-time customer support services is that customers are responding to some problem in our product, something that just didn't work for them on the first try. Something is broken and they want to fix it. That would be a simple way to put it. So one of the strategies of controlling work in progress in this type of scenario is, of course, investing in improved quality of our product that just makes such incidents less frequent, and in the future we see less of this demand. Other approaches include, let's say, enabling our customers to help themselves, and that could be some kind of automated feature that allows them to do something without, let's say, contacting customer support. Of course, such features must be weighed economically. What does it make more sense, let's say, to pay for customer support capacity to handle this sort of issue, or invest in building relatively rarely used feature? Well, if the feature is relatively frequently used, it has a broad use case, then perhaps we should build it. For a relatively niche feature that will only be used by a handful of customers infrequently, then we may as well avoid, building it and actually save money by giving this kind of work to customer support. Something actually I just had to do as a customer of one of my services, requesting a fairly rare configuration change on one of my websites. So such strategies do exist, and they can have an impact of reducing, of work in progress levels reducing over time, and that creates a healthier situation when both WIP and expected time in service, time that customer experiences, are more sustainable. Now, this chart actually shows something different. It shows, rather than a strategic solution, it shows a relatively temporary solution. So what happened around these dates, when we see a very sharp drop of work in progress right around this area, I'm just going to highlight it, like right around here. This is a temporary solution. So some swarming occurred here, so some additional team members were borrowed from other teams to bring down the inventory of outstanding customer requests. The more sustained long-term solutions to this problem look somewhat different. It's usually a more gradual decline of work in progress. So it declines more gradually over time and then stays at a lower level. That is usually the outcome of investments in quality and user self-help. So, long story short, the demand on such services is irrefutable. It never stops, it keeps coming, but we do have some leverage to shape the demand by investing in quality and self-help of our users, resulting in perhaps lower levels of WIP and happier situations. All right, now I'd like to talk about a situation where the demand is kind of more refutable, it's more discretionary, and perhaps we can actually, instead of just automatically committed to everything, to be more deliberate about it. And so, folks, here I'm just reusing a simple process diagram. I don't want to like imply some sort of technology product development is happening here with activities like analyze, build, test, deploy. Could really be any kind of knowledge work. And again, on the right, we have a completed, done state, and some work is delivered to customers. On the left, we have kind of new ideas and perhaps ready options, work items ready to start, and a bunch of activities in between. Kind of an interesting process, but I'm not implying this is a particular industry and particular type of product. So again, we could perhaps put some work in progress limits, let's say, on columns here. However, I want to address a couple of more important points first. So let's say if we have visualized work in progress, let's say using the structure of multiple columns, one column for each major activity, then how do we actually count the number of work items in progress? Now, if, let's say you have some experience, let's say with Kanban, then you probably know the answer to this. If not, then, I'm just gonna give a simple answer here. And the simple answer here is, we have to look at it from the customer's perspective. And the customer's perspective is that at this point, something was promised to them. And this point, something is delivered to them. So once again, everything between these 2 points counts. And it doesn't matter if someone is working on it actively, such as, let's say, this item, or perhaps some time is just ticking away while some work is sent to an outside vendor, such as here. Or perhaps the work is blocked for one reason or another reason, or perhaps yet another reason. So all of this work counts, whether there is some activity going on right now, or perhaps it is simply blocked and not progressing, waiting perhaps for some information or for some other work to be done. All of it counts. And another important thing is, if we look from the point of view of, let's say, workers in more downstream activities, over here, let's say these activities 3 and 4. Sorry. Let's say these workers can have, let's say, their local work in progress limit and try to keep the number of things they're working on at the same time relatively small, just for the sake of their own productivity. Does it really change the total quantity of work? No. The total quantity of work is basically largely affected at 2 points. This is when we increment inventory. That's when we start. And this is when we decrement inventory by delivering some item to the customer. And it turns out that sometimes, and this is particularly true in product companies, in IT departments of large industrial companies, is that sometimes somebody makes a business decision over here, like right at this line, to promise something to customers. And that work goes through a few activities, and then these team members that are shown in the red figures in the downstream activities of process, they only find out about it weeks or months later. And this work is effectively already committed. So they're kind of in a situation that we just saw in the previous example, the work of a, let's say, customer-facing support service. The work is already committed. This team of, let's say, workers visualized with red figures, it could be multiple teams too. I'm just keeping the diagram compact. They are automatically committed to whatever work comes their way, right? So the key is to control work in progress so that we can have sustainable, predictable delivery time from our customer's perspective, is not as much as controlling the multitasking of these red workers with, let's say, their local work in process limits. It's about being mindful of the entire inventory of commitments made to customers and not yet delivered. And so the critical point here is what we call the commitment point, this big red line that I just drew on the left. And we need to be very mindful of where we make these decisions to add to the inventory of promises we make to customers. We have to be more conscious about it, and the best way to do this is to do it in the most transparent way possible, preferably engaging with customers and stakeholders so that we can weigh multiple options, choose the best of them, and be very deliberate, explicit, and transparent about how and when we made these promises to customers. And then, of course, any work item that, let's say, goes from activity 2 into activity 3 is not a surprise to, let's say, workers and teams performing these downstream activities. The act of commitment, making some promise to the customer at this commitment line, incrementing our inventory of commitments. Sometimes the word replenishment is used for this. If you can make it a very frequent, deliberate practice in your organization, then you can just get better at it, and that, of course, means your whole organization will be collectively more mindful about its inventory of commitments and how that correlates with performance of your product lines, services, and projects, and customer and business outcomes. So if you are a manager of, let's say, some product development program, or let's say a project portfolio, or a suite of services where this kind of decision point is present, where you're not automatically committed to every single work item on customer request, where you can generate some ideas and then weigh options and then make promises to customers. Then creating transparency around how you make this decision is a key to success. All right, let's consider yet another pattern. And now I just want to complicate things somewhat. And I want to consider kind of two different sources of demand. So I kind of split the visual board here in two, and the upper swim lane is just basically everything that happens in the previous board. So we have a commitment point. To the left of it there are some options. Then we commit to start, and we have we have our inventory of commitments that just basically starts from here and goes until this finish line when the work item is delivered to customers. And we treat everything to the left as options. However, there is sometimes a very interesting work item, and I just highlighted them with a different color. It's a work item that has a very clear deadline. And it could be, let's say, that you are in a regulated industry and there's some regulation that is due for completion by a certain date. Let's say June 30th this year. It's about 5.5 months away. And sometimes there are certain industry events that, you just cannot move the date, and some work must be completed by that date. So how does such work, and I put such work item on the card of a different color, fit into this work stream? Well, we can consider it as an option for a while. And then we can choose the time when we cross the commitment line and now we commit to start. Preferably, we should roughly know how long these things take. And of course, it's a good topic for different episodes of Secrets of Flow, how long it will take. And I think I already had an episode about that. But we'll come back to that topic. The topic of time is pretty big, and I can probably do a lot more than one episode on it. So, but let's say we have some notion of how long it takes. We know when we need it. We roughly know when to start, and we cross this starting line maybe at that last responsible moment, or maybe just to give us some insurance, we start a bit earlier, and then the work progresses, and then it's done on time, and the work item is delivered on time. So this situation is quite common in regulated businesses, for example, financial services and insurance, where just in order to maintain your license to, let's say, operate an insurance business, you need to comply with a number of government regulation, and governments keep producing it, and so you basically face a certain constant stream of regulatory requirements that all have fixed dates, deadlines attached to them. And you have to complete a chunk of work before that deadline. At the same time, as let's say the general manager of your insurance business wants to, let's say, grow business by, let's say, reaching more potential policyholders and offering them kind of more sophisticated and potentially more revenue producing products, they have all sorts of ideas how to enhance the current insurance products of your company, and that's basically what all these options on yellow cards represent. And sometimes you decide to build some of them, you start them, now it's a commitment, then it flows over here, and then you eventually deliver it to the market, and now it's making money for you. And a business like this has to balance two sources of demand. One is ideas generated about how you want to grow the business. Now you first treat them as options, then you treat them as commitments, you build them into the product, and the result is, well, you gain more customers and you make perhaps more money from your customer base. And the other source of demand is all about complying with regulation and doing some chunks of work by a certain deadline. You have to balance the two. And what's interesting is the commitment to start is present in both cases. But there is perhaps an earlier decision point. Which I would call commitment to doing. And sometimes you commit to doing before you commit to start. Actually, you can have, let's say, a really nice new product idea, and at some point you decide, well, actually, we should definitely do that. Should we start it today? Well, maybe not. But we could start it next month or next quarter. Let's talk about what the right time is. And then you actually start it, and then you do it, and then it's done, right? So in this case, your two commitments are decoupled. Commit to doing happens before commitment to start. However, The same isn't actually true about government regulation. You don't actually decide to commit to do it or not. You are already committed. And you are committed effectively automatically. So this part, not yet committed to doing it, doesn't really exist for these requirements. If you chose to be in this business, then you are automatically committed to fulfilling the government regulatory requirements for this type of business. So what's interesting is that it matches very much the scenario that I started this talk with. The customer service team, the customer support team, that is automatically committed to every customer request. So in this case, instead of customer service requests, we have government regulations. But the pattern of flow is exactly the same. Government chooses to show up at your door by creating this regulation, and you are automatically committed to fulfilling it. And so it turns out, in order for us to satisfy some important criteria as far as timeliness of fulfilling these regulations, we must be mindful of inventory of all such commitments, not just the ones we committed to start. So yes, commitments to start, that's important too, but we must also track the inventory of how many outstanding regulatory commitments are out there, the ones we are committed to doing automatically by simply being in this business. And if this inventory from end to end is growing, that's because government became more active at writing such regulation. We have to do something about it, and we have to match it with our capability. We perhaps need to somehow enhance it, build it up, so that we can actually handle the demand that we are automatically committed. Perhaps we need to devise some ingenious solution, some kind of productivity enhancement, something that allows us perhaps to speed up the process of implementing such regulatory requirements and so on. All right, so while I was on this example, let's say this pattern happens in regulated businesses, it turns out that technology product companies aren't actually like immune from this difficult pattern, right? They face a very similar challenge. However, instead of government regulation, sometimes it's just the market that speaks. What I mean by this is, yes, sure enough, in a lot of technology product businesses, you have ideas that you turn into options, then you turn into commitments, then you work on them, and you deliver them to customers. But sometimes markets speak, and they just say, you know what, this feature isn't really optional anymore. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. Your product must have it, or customers won't buy it. And in the product life cycle, there could be moments when a whole bunch of features that were considered nice to have become must have. They kind of degrade from kind of this higher, more exciting, perhaps differentiator type to kind of more stable, boring kind of table stakes. And when this happens, you are automatically committed to doing by simply choosing to be in this particular product business. So as a consequence of your chosen strategy, we choose to be in this business, we choose to make this type of product, we choose to be in this sort of market. Well, customers in this market consider this thing mandatory. Well, then we are automatically committed to doing it. And once again, we ended up in this pattern where demand arrives automatically. So you do not actually deliberately increment inventory of work items. It just happens. It arrives on your doorstep, and now you have to deal with it. So this type of situation, as it turns out, affects not only companies in regulated businesses, but very much the same pattern of flow in product companies as well, except it's just the actor that creates this seemingly irrefutable demand is different. And now I want to talk about yet another pattern. Just want to switch to a different screen and mirror in a moment. And this is a pattern quite common in a lot of companies where, let's say, the process is not a simple, straightforward line from, let's say, start and do something and then deliver. And there are some interesting dependencies in the process. And so let's have a look at this picture. Again, a very simple kind of boilerplate diagram of the process end to end with, from commitment to delivery. A few activities. Clearly, there are some external dependencies. There are some sources of blockage. And what is happening here, I just want to look at into what this particular green blocker represents on work items in the last activity column. So this is a shared service dependency. When the work item is blocked for this reason, visualized with the green blocker, so we create a demand on another group in our company, and it kind of becomes a ticket on their board. So they kind of queue of such requests. Then they do something, then it's done, and when it's done, it just goes back to us. So in this way, some team or perhaps department which is external to our product development pipeline can contribute their expertise to the product that we're building here. So perhaps enhancing some important quality of our product that perhaps help us compete in some market segment. What's very important to realize here that we think like, what does it like every time, let's say this work item spends in this block state like more than a few days, right? Like, why does it take these folks so long to deliver this result? So it's important to realize that we're not alone. Yes, we are their customer, but they also have other customers, which I kind of highlighted here. So all this WIP comes from other customers, and it's important to be mindful of that. And the total amount of WIP, the total demand placed upon this shared service, and they're automatically committed to servicing this demand, well, it has impact on how long it takes to get through their work stages and produce the result and return it to us. And once again, we are in a kind of this situation of that customer support team that I started my talk with, except now the customers are within the company and we have a bit more leverage on the quantity of WIP that is hitting this shared service. We can certainly anticipate how much of this demand is going to hit the shared service. We can also shape it by setting various policies. Folks, just before the Christmas and New Year break, we had a pretty interesting talk by a service delivery manager of one of Toronto's high-tech companies. He manages a shared service in a product company, and during that talk, he gave an example of how they try to estimate and forecast the demand that will fall onto the shared service. Let's say in the next sprint or the next quarter. They go by some historical data, so they keep their tabs on how many work items arrive at their service. But they also anticipated like this. Let's say our product pipeline is going to build, let's say, 100 features this year, and let's say there is a 30% probability that in this particular process activity we will need help from an expert group which is implemented as a shared service. Well, in this case, the shared service can expect 30 service requests from our product group alone. Now, how many other product groups does this shared service service? Who shares your shared services? Okay, they get 30 items from us, 30 items from another service, 60 items from yet another product group, 360 items from yet another product division, and that's their total demand. Right? So you can anticipate how much demand will fall on the shared service by looking at how much stuff all the customers of a shared service are committed to, right? And what percentage of that volume will eventually turn into service requests on your shared service. So it is possible to anticipate and predict or forecast rather, and that just buys you some time to respond to this demand. But we can also control what actually qualifies to be serviced by this shared service and what should be handled, let's say, within product teams without generating this shared service dependency. And here we have to weigh things economically. So there is certainly some marginal economic value to the expert contribution from a shared service, right? It enhances the quality of our product in some way. It makes it more attractive to our customers, and that has an economic value. But on the flip side, we have the economic cost of delay. Right, so this generates a delay in the process. It has economic cost. We also have to coordinate the work of more than one service here, so that creates some management overhead, and that definitely has a cost. So we have some economic benefit and have an economic cost. Presumably, we've made some good decisions. And this dependency produces a net gain for the company, right? If not, then perhaps we should consider reducing demand on our shared service by simply insourcing and handling some of that work within the product group, right? And saving ourselves time and money. So the bottom line here is, again, this seemingly irrefutable demand and this work in progress that just comes in large quantities from like all directions. That pattern is there, but we do have more control to do something about it by shaping demand and by anticipating it. The key to doing this is, of course, creating some kind of transparency about exactly what does this product development program doing, what is this service doing, how does this program interact with services that it depends on, and from the point of view of this service, who are its customers, which product groups send service requests to the service. So figuring out these organizational connections in a transparent manner. So if you are a manager of a service like this, if you are a manager of the product line like this, if you are let's say a CTO or a VP of product engineering whom let's say these managers report to, then like number one practical tip for how to deal with these situations when there's so much work in progress and it just keeps coming, is to create this sort of organizational map and making these connections very visible. Folks, I want to kind of briefly talk about yet another area where work in progress can go hiding. And now I want to take a peek on the other side of the commitment point, the funnel of, let's say, new product ideas that you eventually validate and select and turn into real ready options. So when you do cross the commitment point, now it becomes your inventory of work in progress. So here I kind of visualized a product funnel that starts with rough ideas. They're kind of all of gray color, and then colors become more vivid in this diagram as we approach the narrower end of the funnel. So where is WIP here? How do these ideas and options move in the funnel exactly? What moves them? Well, someone has to decide, let's say, to advance one of these ideas or options towards the narrower end of the funnel, or perhaps discard it. How do they decide? Well, presumably on the basis of some information, but where does the information come from? Well, it could come from some experiments. Let's say build a small prototype, a minimally viable product, some kind of concierge service, get out of the building, test it with the customer, learn something, and perhaps that informs another experiment. And one experiment at a time, you learn, you gain new information, and on the basis of this information, you choose better ideas and discard ideas that were, there is an expression, it was a good idea at the time, and it exists for a reason, right? Well, it turns out, then, who is going to do all these experiments? And we're back to the beginning. We're back to this seemingly irrefutable demand, right? A lot of experiments that you have to do, right? Your experimentation team faces this huge demand. All these, I don't know, maybe hundreds of experiments to do, right? Perhaps they work on only a few experiments at a time, but nevertheless, there's this big and growing backlog of more experiments so that we can learn some new information, so that we can make some decisions in the funnel. So we're back to that pattern that we started with. And it's important to see this kind of work in progress when you look at, let's say, some visualization of this product idea funnel, because every movement of every idea here has to be informed by some information. Information has to come from somewhere, and someone actually has to do some real work to discover it. So if you have a particularly large funnel, and that could be because you run a fairly uncertain product business, some very novel marketplace, then you can face potentially a very high level of demand and a very large inventory of experiments to do in your business. However, I should qualify this answer, this statement. There's one very important caveat, and it has something to do with your chosen strategy. Because sometimes you actually have to discover all this information yourself and run all these intricate experiments, and that's a lot of work. But you have to do this if your strategy is that of a market leader. No one has done it before you, so you are the one who has to discover all of this. However, if your strategy is more of a follower, then this information may already be available. The market has already spoken. Someone actually ran the experiment, and they found out which way customers prefer. And if that's the case, then perhaps that important bit of information that informs your choices to advance some ideas and options and discard others is already there. So you can actually skip some work, and therefore the number of experiments, the volume of demand on your, let's say, product management, your experimentation group, is significantly less. So the amount of work in progress facing your product team may be dramatically higher or dramatically lower because of your chosen product strategy. All right, so I've been talking 50 minutes already, so it's time to wrap up. All right. Today I went on a tour of places where work in progress lives, where it hides, sometimes in plain sight, and I tried to consider a number of different situations. Well, actually, they feel different, but at the same time, they have something in common. They share some common attributes. First, we looked at kind of irrefutable demand of let's say, a customer support group that is automatically committed to serving customer requests. So the inventory of what we promised and not yet delivered to customers increments automatically. Customers just do it. And of course, there's some keys to success there. Something can be done by investing in quality, investing in self-help facilities that can reduce the unhealthy levels of inventory to more healthy levels and assured better service delivery performance. Then we looked into more kind of a product world where you can be more deliberate about incrementing and decrementing inventory, making a more explicit commitment point, engaging customers there, being more transparent about how you make promises to customers, and it keeps your total inventory contained. However, it turns out sometimes there are other actors in this product business, such as government regulators, and sometimes markets themselves behave in the same fashion. And we're back to the beginning. We're back to the situation where you face some demand automatically. You're automatically committed to it. It is still important to pay attention to the level of inventory of that demand so that you can respond in time. And then we consider the situation where, let's say, your product line depends on a number of shared services. This is a very common situation. And again, there is this hidden whip on each of your shared services that is a result of some commitments, some promises made in, let's say, your product group that relies on that shared service. And keys to success are, again, you can be more transparent about it. You can explore relationships of which shared services your product line depends on, which other product groups this shared service provides services to, who shares your shared service, and that way you can be mindful of the total demand, the total automatic actual level of work in progress that is hitting the shared service. And finally, peaking across the commitment point to upstream, depending on whether your strategy is a market leader or a follower, you can have dramatically different levels of demand on the group within your company that does all that exciting experimentations with MVPs and prototypes, getting out of the building and facing customers and learning about the new emerging markets and novel products and services you can bring to those markets. So that level is usually higher for leaders. It's usually lower for followers, because for followers, some markets, some information is already available from the market. So depending on your strategy, some consequences for how you operationalize the services performed by various teams and levels of inventory, of course, all of that will be different. All right. Thank you very much for watching or listening. I'm seeing comments in the chat, some check-ins and applause for some of the regular watchers and listeners. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next week. I'll post annotations to this video this afternoon, and think of a topic for the next week. Please see announcements on this YouTube channel as well as LinkedIn. That's it for today. Thank you very much, and goodbye.